Hello everyone, this is OP Rai from Jagran Public School, Varanasi. Today I am going to discuss and explain the topic Voice of the Rain composed by Walt Whitman from the book Hornbill of class 11th. But before I proceed with the explanation part, let us get to know about the poet and the theme of the poetry, The Voice of the Rain. Let's get to know about the poet briefly. Walt Whitman, born in the year 1819, was a renowned American poet. He belongs to 19th century pre-modern poetic era. He is fondly and popularly known as Voice of America, who preferred to write in free-flowing verse that in a way truly reflects his spirit of liberty. The publication of his long poem Leaves of Grass in the year 1855 brought him immense recognition and fame. He demised and left for his final abode in the year 1892. He has written many thought-provoking and inspirational quotes. Among the many quotes which he has written, and the one that is my favorite and I quote is, "Keep your face towards the sunshine and the shadows will fall behind you." Let's begin with the introduction to the poetry, The Voice of the Rain. You see, this entire poem is personified. There is neither rhyme scheme nor do the lines stay of the same length. Although we can read each phrase just in one breath, we find ourselves breathless as the line runs on and eventually becomes a part of the whole. This kind of poetry is known as prosaic poetry, that is, poetry that is written like prose. Now the question is, what is the theme of this poetry? Well, the main theme reflected in the poem is importance of cyclic nature of rain as well as poetry. As rain is vital for the earth, so is poetry for the readers and the poet. Both nurture, nourish, beautify, quench, purify, and eventually return back to their place of origin, giving happiness, joy, fulfillment, and appreciation. Now I am going to explain to you the poetry stanza wise. Let's read the first stanza. The poem reads, "And who art thou? Said I to the soft falling shower, which stains to tell, gave me an answer as here translated. I am the poem of earth, said the voice of the rain. Eternal I rise, impalpable, out of the land and the bottomless sea, upward to heaven, whence, vaguely formed, altogether changed and yet the same." The poem begins with the imaginary conversation between the poet and rain, whereby the poet Walt Whitman asks the rain who she is. To the surprise of the poet, the soft falling rain answers to the question posed by the poet, saying that it is the poem of the earth. Further, the rain explains about its origin and perpetual cyclic nature as to how it is formed. It says that it rises from various water bodies on the land and unfathomable bottomless seas up in the sky in the form of the vapor. There it gets transformed into the cloud, yet at the core of it is same, which means still water, only form is changed. This cyclic phenomenon is so subtle that we don't see or feel it, yet it happens eternally. The word impalpable in the fourth line refers to it, which means something which cannot be noticed, touched, or felt. Now, let's have a look at the second stanza, and it reads, "I descend to lave the draughts, atomies, dust layers of the globe, and all that in them without me were seeds only, latent, unborn. And forever, by day and night, I give back life to my own origin and make pure and beautify it." In the first stanza, you saw the rain revealing its identity, origin, and how it is formed. In the second stanza, rain tells the poet how it returns the favor to the place of its origin, which is earth, when descends down from the heaven. The rain further explains that it quenches the thirst of drought-ridden landscapes, washes of dust particles, layers, and settles them all down. You must have noticed how the crops in the fields, flowers in the garden, branches and leaves of trees look greener and cleaner after the rain. Even the lanes, streets, and infrastructures look cleaner as the layers of dust deposited on them get washed off, isn't it? And all the seeds underneath the soil, which, as a matter of fact, contain life, flourish when the rain comes down. Therefore, rain endlessly gives life to its own origin, that is, the earth, and supports all forms of life on it. Now let's look at the third stanza, and it reads, "For song issuing from its birthplace after fulfillment, wandering, wrecked or unwrecked, duly with love returns." It means in the last stanza, the poet compares the rain to a poem or song. A song is born in the heart of a human and then reaches wide and far. Recognized or unrecognized doesn't really matter. It gives pleasure and joy to one and all and then returns back to the Creator in the form of appreciation. Similarly, the rain too originates from the earth and then comes back down on earth and makes it clean, pure, and beautiful and supports the life on it. Finally, let's look at the conclusion of this poetry. In short, scientifically, rain in this poetry reflects a water cycle of precipitation, evaporation, and condensation. As life's blessing, it laves the droughts, giving life to seeds and beautifying the earth. Now, let's have a look at the important poetic devices which are used here in this poetry. The first poetic device is personification because this entire poetry is personified. But what personification is? Personification is a poetic device in which a non-living thing or an inanimate thing is shown as if it has life in it. It is given the human characteristic and quality. In this poetry you see, rain is given the human quality and characteristic because it is capable of speech. It has the dialogue throughout the poetry with the poet. And therefore you can say that this entire poetry is personified. Because in reality we all know that rain itself is a non-living entity. It cannot have the dialogue, it cannot have the conversation, but here in this poetry it does, and therefore this poetry is personified. Second important poetic device which is used here is metaphor. What metaphor is? A metaphor is a figure of speech or the poetic device that directly refers to one thing by mentioning another. It provides clarity, identity, and hidden similarities between two ideas or things. To understand it better, let's have a look at this quotation which is taken from a very famous novel titled As You Like It, written by William Shakespeare. The quotation is, "All the world is a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances." This famous quotation expresses a metaphor because world is not literally a stage, yet the writer has taken it for granted as the world is a stage. Similarly, in this poetry, the rain says, "I am the poem of the earth," to identify the qualities of the rain with those of a poem. Another poetic device used is hyperbole. Hyperbole is a poetic device which uses extreme exaggeration. Now let's examine this line. "Eternal I rise, impalpable, out of the land and bottomless seas." The sense of permanence is extremely strong throughout the poem. The cyclic lifestyle is endless and shall continue as long as the connection between the rain and earth persists. The words eternal, impalpable, and bottomless show that though we record the overt reality, the true scope of nature remains tantalizingly beyond our rational comprehension. The next poetic device which is used here is imagery. Soft falling shower brings the image of falling rain in reader's mind, and therefore we can say imagery is used here. Another poetic device used here is antithesis. Antithesis is poetic device involving contradiction of ideas, clauses, words and sentences. Look at the line, altogether changed and yet the same. The rain changes from intangible vapors to abstract clouds. The last poetic device used in the poetry is parenthesis. Let's get to know what parenthesis is. Parenthesis is a qualifying or explanatory sentence, clause or words that writers insert into a paragraph or passage. Look at the lines. For song issuing from its birthplace after fulfillment, wandering, wrecked or unwrecked, duly with love, returns. These lines have been placed in brackets because they are not a part of the conversation between the poet and the rain. Rather, its aftermath where the poet reflects on the conversation. He realizes that rain's life is similar to that of a song. The song's birthplace is poet's heart. Once complete, it wanders from one person to another. It may change or remain the same as it travels, but one day it returns to the poet with all due love and appreciation of the listeners. Hope this will help you understand the poetry. See you next. Till then, goodbye.